You know, sometimes the coldest winters aren't outside. They're the ones you carry inside your chest. That winter, 2002, I was living in a small house just outside Toledo, Ohio. My husband, Frank, was working 2 jobs after the factory shut down, and I was trying to keep the family together, one grocery coupon at a time. The walls of that house carried every argument, every sigh, every laugh that never lasted long enough. Our 2 kids, Lisa, who was 14, and Tommy, who had just turned 10. They heard more than they should have. Frank and I weren't always like that. We used to dance in the kitchen after dinner. But the world changed after 2001. People lost their jobs, neighbors moved away, and silence filled the streets where children used to play. Sometimes, without even realizing it, you get used to silence. To not talking to anyone, to no one asking how you are. Silence feels peaceful at first, and then it becomes loneliness. That morning, the library windows were fogged. Outside, snow was falling. But inside, the only warmth came from the quiet hiss of the coffee machine. There was a pile of returned books on my desk. I picked one up. The title read, How to Start Over. I smiled. Maybe that's why I always loved libraries. Because sometimes, the answers life can't give you find hidden between the pages. It had been 4 days since I last heard Frank's voice. He wasn't answering the phone anymore. After a while, silence becomes an answer too. When Lisa came home from school, she slammed the door. She had become one of those teenage girls who didn't want to talk to anyone. Tommy was in his room drawing, as always. That night, in his drawing, there weren't 4 people, only 3. I set 3 plates on the table. Then I held the 4th one in my hand for a moment and put it back. That's when I realized some things never come back. Frank and I met in 1988. Back then, I worked as a reporter for the local paper. His laugh was so strong, it could change the air in a whole room. One day he told me, "You think too much, Maggie." But I was a woman who couldn't stop thinking. And maybe that's exactly why I loved him. Then life came along and broke a love into pieces. Bills, sickness, exhaustion, sleepless nights. And one day you look up and realize the person you loved doesn't speak your language anymore. Lisa kept her door closed most of the time. One day I went in. On her desk was a notebook, and on the cover she had written, "If I ever leave, I'll leave quietly." That sentence cut right through me, because quiet departures are always the ones that hurt the most. I had left my mother quietly once too, from a small town chasing a big dream. And I realized sometimes daughters follow their mother's footsteps without even meaning to. One day, an old man came to the library. He held a faded photograph in his hand. He asked, "Do you know this woman?" I recognized her immediately, Mrs. Turner, a woman who used to live near the factory where Frank worked. But she had passed away 3 years ago. The man stayed silent for a while, then said softly, "Sometimes people don't need the truth." That sentence echoed inside me. Maybe Frank didn't want the truth either. Maybe he wasn't running from me. Maybe he was running from reality. As time passed, the photos on our walls began to fade. But I wasn't crying anymore. On the days I read books to children at the library, I felt like I was touching a piece of my own childhood again. When I looked into those little faces filled with hope, I thought, maybe life isn't just about what you lose, but about what you still have the courage to touch. One evening, Lisa came to me and asked, "Mom, will Dad ever come back?" I looked at her and said, Some people do come back, Lisa. But sometimes, only their memories do. Now, when I look back, I remember that winter as a turning point. It broke me, but it also reshaped me. These days, when I drink my morning coffee and look out the window, I accept the world as it is, with its flaws, its silences, and its scars. Because sometimes, the light that seeps through your cracks is the very thing that brings you back to life. The snow melted slowly that year, as if even winter didn't want to let go. I remember the first morning the sun came through the kitchen window again. It landed on the old table where Frank used to read the newspaper. For a moment, I almost made 2 cups of coffee out of habit. Then I stopped myself and smiled. That small act, making just 1 cup, felt like the quiet beginning of something new. Spring was always my favorite season, but that year it came differently. The air felt heavier, slower. The neighbors started cleaning their yards, kids were riding their bikes again, and the world outside seemed to move on easily. Inside, I was still learning how to do the same. I started walking every morning before work. Just a few blocks, nothing fancy. I'd pass by the old bakery, the one that always smelled like cinnamon, and I'd see Mrs. Carter watering her tulips. She'd wave from her porch and shout, "Morning, Maggie," in that cheerful way of hers. I'd wave back, pretending everything was fine. I think she knew it wasn't, but kindness often hides behind silence. At the library, the children's corner became my favorite place. Reading to those kids reminded me of a version of myself I thought I'd lost. Their questions, their laughter, they filled the room with something that almost felt like home. I began collecting their drawings, little stick figures of us with books in our hands. I kept them in a folder under my desk, like small tokens of hope. Lisa started spending more time outside too. She met a girl named Emily from her art class, and they'd sit on the porch sketching for hours. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing, really laughing. And for the first time in months, that sound didn't hurt. It felt like sunlight breaking through a dusty window. Tommy was quieter, but in his own way, he was healing too. He gave me one of his drawings for my birthday. It was the 3 of us, standing under a tree. The branches were shaped like open arms. I think that was his way of saying we were still a family, even if someone was missing. One afternoon, while sorting old letters, I found one from Frank. It was dated 2 years before he left. He'd written, "If things ever fall apart, I hope you find peace in the small things. In coffee, in books, in the sound of your kids' laughter." I must have read that letter a dozen times. The words didn't make me cry this time. They just made me breathe a little deeper. Because maybe, in his own way, he was saying goodbye long before he actually left. Life didn't become easier after that. It just became simpler. I started noticing things I used to overlook. The sound of the fridge humming at night, the way the wind rattled the window frames, the smell of old paper at the library. Those small, ordinary moments began to hold me together. One evening, Lisa came into the kitchen with her sketchbook. She sat down and said, "Mom, I drew you today." I laughed and asked, "Oh yeah? How do I look?" She smiled and said, "You look like someone who finally stopped waiting." That line, I don't know why, but it stayed with me, because she was right. I had stopped waiting. Sometimes healing doesn't come with big moments or loud realizations. It sneaks in quietly, through everyday things, through mornings that don't hurt as much, through nights where you can finally fall asleep without replaying the past. That spring, I planted lavender by the window. Frank used to hate the smell of it, said it was too strong, but I loved it. And every time the breeze carried that scent into the house, I felt something shift inside me. Like forgiveness, gentle, unannounced, but real. Now, when I close the library at the end of the day, I walk home slowly. The sun sets behind the trees, painting the streets gold. I pass the bakery, wave to Mrs. Carter, and open the door to a quiet, peaceful house. The kettle whistles softly. The cat curls up by the fireplace. And for the first time in a long while, silence feels like a friend again. Because maybe this is what starting over really looks like. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, just a woman, her children, a warm cup of tea, and the steady sound of her own heartbeat, finally calm.